Welcome back to my channel, Sinister Files with Kai. Today we're going to start a brand new series called Zodiac Sign Serial Killers, where we talk about a zodiac sign and a serial killer that had that zodiac sign. So today we're going to talk about Scorpio, and the serial killer is Belle Gunness. So let's get started. Belle Gunness was born on November 11th, 1859 in Norway. She was the youngest of 8 children, and at the age of 14 years old, she began working at farms neighboring to where she lived with her family by milking and herding cattle to save money in order for her to move to New York City in the United States. She actually ends up moving to the United States in 1881, but instead of New York City, she moves to Chicago to join her sister who lived there with her husband. There in Chicago, she worked as a domestic worker and then she got a job at a butcher shop. Fast forward to 1884, Belle meets and marries Mads Ditlev Anton Sorensen. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. Together, the couple owned a candy store and a home. Both the home and the candy store were insured, and for whatever reason, both burned down. Mad and Belle collected the insurance policy money from both the home and the candy store. They also had two babies together that, for whatever reason, ended up passing away from inflammation of the large intestine. Of course, both babies were insured, and Belle ended up collecting the money from the insurance policies for their passing. The neighbors gossiped a lot about the babies, especially their passing, because they never saw Belle pregnant, or at least she never appeared pregnant, which to them was very suspicious and just weird. Belle also had two insurance policies on her husband Mads. The thing is that one insurance policy was expiring, let's say today, and the other one was going into effect also today. For whatever reason, he ends up passing away that day. Belle explained that he had come home with a really bad headache that day from work, so she provided him a powder for his pain and left him be. A few minutes later, or a few hours later, she just went to check up on him and see how he was, and he had just passed. Belle ended up collecting the money from both insurance policies, making a total of $5,000. She used that money to move to Indiana and bought a pig farm. Now, fast forward to April 1st, 1902, Belle meets and marries Peter Gunness. Together, they had an infant daughter, and one day, when Peter was out of the house, his daughter passes of unknown circumstances and causes in Belle's care. Just 8 months later, he also passed due to a skull injury. Belle explained that Peter had reached for something on a high shelf and a meat grinder fell on him that ended up smashing his skull. A district attorney convened a coroner's jury suspecting unaliving rather than accidental, but nothing came of that case. Belle ended up collecting $3,000 of insurance money of his passing. Fast forward to 1905, she started placing marriage ads in Chicago's newspaper, and a man named Henry Gerholt answered her ad and ended up visiting her at her farm. While he was there, he wrote his family a letter saying he liked the farm and he was going to stay there with her. But that was the last time that his family ever heard from him, so they decided to contact Belle. When they did, she told them that Henry had gone off with horse traders to Chicago. Weird. But for whatever reason, she kept his trunk and his fur coat. The very next year, in 1906, another man named John Moe answered her ad. They corresponded and exchanged letters for several months. Eventually, Moe decided to travel to her farm to see her, and before doing so, he withdrew a large sum of cash. No one ever heard from him or saw him ever again. But although no one ever saw him again, a carpenter who did occasional work for Belle observed that Moe's trunk remained in her home. A couple of years later, in April of 1908, her farmhouse burned to the ground, and in the ruins, authorities found the bodies of a headless adult woman, Belle, and her 3 children. This, of course, led to a huge investigation that led the investigators and the police to find the partial remains of at least 11 additional people in her property. During the investigation, Ashley Gillian. I hope that's how you pronounce it. Sorry for the mispronunciation. She contacted the police after she found correspondence and like different letters between Belle and her brother Andrew. In those letters, Belle was asking him to move to her farm, bring a lot of money, and to keep it all a secret. The sister visited Belle's farm after all of the findings with a man who had been hired by Belle to do work on the farm. He led her to a pen for hogs. So they decided to dig one out, and there they found two hands, 2 feet, and one head, which she recognized as her brother Andrew. She, of course, reported it to the police, and the police came back to the farm and found dozens of those pens. Of course, they dug every single one of them out and found torsos and hands, arms hacked from the shoulders down, and masses of human bones wrapped in loose flesh that dripped like jelly. Investigators found that all of the bodies had been in the same way. First, the head was taken off, then the arms were removed at the shoulders, and then the legs were severed at the knees. And on every single skull that they were able to find, they also found blunt force trauma to the head in different gouges, meaning that she hit them over the head, and that is how they either lost consciousness or how they passed. And once they were unalived, then she decided to their bodies. On the very first day of excavation, the investigators found 5 bodies, and on the second, they found 6, plus one that Andrew's sister had found, that is 11 bodies. Plus one more, as you remember, there was a headless adult woman that was found with Belle when the farmhouse burned down, and 3 more because she also unalived her 3 children. So that comes to a total of 16 bodies. The saddest thing about this case is that none of the remains were ever able to be identified, and Belle never served any prison time, never faced any trial or anything like that because she passed and was unalived in the fire that took down her house and led to all of these findings. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section and subscribe if you like to see this kind of content. See you next time for the next serial killer.